Well, welcome to our final episode in our Bible study of characters and acts, and we're ending on a tremendously high note with the Apostle Paul, given he's a very, very important person and central figure in the book of Acts. And as John's already noted, Luke's Paul is slightly different to Paul's Paul, so we'll see if any of you spot the differences. So we're going to look at the passage, particularly of Paul on the Areopagus in Athens, where he gives one of his many speeches.
So 3 questions in our final quick quiz tonight. What locations, plural, did Paul visit while in Athens? Which god was tried by murder? Which god was tried for murder by the other gods on the Areopagus?
Oh.
And what was the insult thrown at Paul by the Athenians? We want the Greek as well as the English, please. All right, what locations did Paul visit while in Athens?
The synagogue?
He went to the synagogue like he did in just about every place that he went to, according to Luke.
Yep.
He might have gone with Sharon to the KFC.
Into KFC.
I wasn't going there.
Well, that's
Nick was
possible,
going
Bill.
there.
Where would KFC be located?
The marketplace.
In the marketplace, right next to the shopping centre. Yeah, exactly. The marketplace is the second place.
And the Areopagus.
And the Areopagus. Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
And there was a fourth place there.
Which is the statue of the unknown god.
Which would have been on the main street. Therefore, you walked down the main street, even though it wasn't written.
Well, the marketplace is pretty main, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. Which god was tried for murder by the other gods at the Areopagus?
Ares.
It's the god Ares.
God of war.
Right. He was charged with the murder of Areopagus, who was a son of Poseidon, after Areopagus attempted to rape Alcippe, the daughter of Ares and Agralus. Now, in our system of law, that might have a, well, no, it wouldn't have a defense, self-defense kind of thing, but in the ancient world, he was seen to be upholding the honour of his daughter, and so was acquitted. And what is the insult thrown at Paul by the Athenians?
Babbler.
They call him a babbler.
Yeah.
The Greek word is a combination of 2 words, spermologos. Now, spermos, you may recognise, is the Greek word for seed, because the English word sperm is referring to the seed. And logos is the word. So spermologos was really like a little bird that hopped around picking up bits and pieces of words from here and there, like a bird picks up seeds. A preacher picks up words to speak. Modern day preachers, of course, would do nothing so crass as to raid resources that have little stories they could tell or anecdotes and that kind of thing, would they?
No.
Spermologos is pretty world standard kind of thing. Okay, so that's our quick quiz about Athens. So let's think about Paul. Let's think about Jewish preachers in the Hellenized world.
Well, you can see that Paul has gone into the synagogue in quite a number of places, which John has listed up there on the screen. And he's also at Philippi gone down to the river looking for something that's, if you like, equating the synagogue as it's a gathering place for Jews, as we looked at last week. And he ends by visiting the Jerusalem temple. So where Paul's going to these places in the book of Acts as he travels around, he's speaking to Jewish audiences in all places. Sorry, was that a question from someone? No? Okay. So he refers a lot to Hebrew scriptures because he's speaking to Jewish people and he's in these Jewish places of worship. And he quotes books from the Old Testament like Isaiah. If you've been in my Bible studies before, you know I've said many, many times, no Isaiah, no New Testament, especially Second Isaiah, because it's from Second Isaiah a lot of the mission activity and understanding of Jesus is actually drawn. And Acts is no exception to this, where the light to the Gentiles, Paul in effect sees himself in that way. That the Jewish people are meant to be a light to the Gentiles. And Peter has done the same thing while preaching in Jerusalem, as has Stephen. They're all preaching to, at that point in time, Jews and quoting from the sacred scripture of the Jewish people, which is integral to their message. So everywhere that Paul goes, he and his companions are encountering diaspora Jews. If you don't know the word diaspora, it just means like to be spread out, because Jews didn't always live in the homeland. They were spread across various parts of the Roman Empire. And they're very influenced by the dominant Hellenistic culture of the past 3 centuries. So even though they're still Jews and most of them follow the law, there's still a lot of evidence of Hellenistic influence on things like the culture. It would be the marketplace, how they traded, where they bought things and what they bought. Jews accommodated and enculturated into the life of the Greco-Romans in their diaspora, even though they still basically followed the law. But you couldn't escape Hellenistic law and customs if that is where you were residing. So once Paul seems to move out from the idea of he's just preaching to Jews, his primary interaction is with Gentiles, Epicureans and Stoics in Athens, where he has a rigorous theological debate with some of them, and then with Demetrius the silversmith and others in that train in Ephesus, where there's a large crowd of Artemis worshippers, and presumably the silversmiths are employed making statues of Artemis for those worshippers, which is one of the reasons they get so cross with him. And he dialogues with various administrative people in that city as well. And while it's true he also visits the synagogue, what Luke is reporting largely is what his speech is to the Gentiles. And they ask him, do you know Greek? And of course Paul did, as countless thousands of other educated Jews would. And there's a reason for that. Our whole New Testament is written in Greek. It's called Koine Greek. It's the common Greek it's not like Attic Greek, which is the ancient Greek of the Hellenistic world. But it was the language of every day because it was used for trade and commerce. So merchants needed a way of talking to people they were buying from and selling to. And Koine Greek just became what was picked up across the Roman Empire, and it covered a really wide area. And so through the language, Greek culture had spread to all sorts of places, conquered by Alexander the Great back in the 330s BCE. And this is reflected in the language of our New Testament and also in the culture that they found themselves in. So Acts offers numerous indications of the Hellenistic influence on the earliest Christians, the message they proclaimed, how they proclaimed it, because there's all sorts of Hellenistic rhetoric and other things built into these speeches as they were proclaiming, as reported by Luke. The places they went and who they encountered are all going to make a change in this growing, expanding movement. And we know really from what's in our New Testament that I'm going to say the Hellenistic church won, the Gentile church won, because that was where Christianity was taken up to the greatest extent. Communities like the community of the Ebionites and the Gospel of Matthew's, another community of mainly Jewish folk who saw themselves as Messianic Jews, died out over time because they were very small, and it was Gentile Christians that picked up the religion of Jesus and became his predominant followers and spread it throughout the empire. So we have some questions for you to think about. What were the factors in moving the early followers of Jesus, who were predominantly Jews and God-fearers, that's how it started, from a Jewish movement to a movement that crossed the wider Hellenized world? And what advantages did it bring, and what disadvantages did that bring? All right, how did you go with these questions? What were the factors in moving the early followers of Jesus, who were predominantly Jews and God-fearers, from a Jewish movement to a Hellenistic one? Any theories you'd like to advance?
I guess the commonality of language would have been an important factor.
Yes.
Across that region, plus the movement of people, the safe movement of people across, and people
and they were living in a Hellenized world, and so perhaps a bit more open to change and thinking and new thoughts and other things.
Yes. So someone who's been enculturated in a polytheistic movement might be more likely to accept a newish God popping up. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I was saying.
Excellent.
I'm glad you checked.
And sorry to raise this, but also commerce and money flows and markets and things like that.
Yeah.
Sorry to be very crass, but I'm sure that must have been a factor.
It's still a factor, Matt. In research I've done about what changes conservative community minds, what hits their wallet is right up there. So, yeah, if you can save them money, they're much more inclined to listen to you. So I think that's absolutely correct.
And there would have been some syncretism of thought beyond their traditional Jewish patterns to, they're open to being adaptive to other thoughts, other ideas.
Yeah. So why do you think being a follower of Jesus, if I put it in another way, was more attractive to a Gentile audience than a Jewish one?
Not as many rules to follow. More liberal.
That's true. You're not asked to follow the whole Torah. So you'd be asked as a God-fearer to follow quite a bit of it, but you could stop short of things like circumcision, for example.
Not as many sacrifices are required to be offered to this new God?
Maybe not to this new God, but certainly in the Hellenistic world, sacrifices were quite common. They offered as many as Jewish people did. So I don't know that would have been a factor to deter or to encourage either way.
Well, cost less if we're talking about money.
Well, it might, if money is an issue and all you've got is a turtle dove once a year, that is true.
I think maybe another factor is that we possibly have in our minds Jews are like this, but then when you go into the Hellenistic world, you get a whole other set of options. And we know from Jewish history that for the 2 or more centuries before the time of Jesus, that even in Judea and Galilee, and indeed even in Jerusalem, there were Hellenized elements. There were Greek speakers. The Jews were doing business with Gentiles who required them to speak Greek. We even know from Josephus that there was more than 100 years before the time of Jesus a high priest whose name was Theophilus. Now, I'm not suggesting it was the Theophilus to whom Luke wrote, but what's striking about the name Theophilus for a Jew?
Very Greek.
It's a Greek name,
yes.
lover of God. So the high priest had a Greek name. And we know that there was actually a lot of angst going on amongst the priestly class about how much the priests were selling out as opposed to remaining faithful to that good old time religion that they had been charged with keeping. So even in Jerusalem before the time of Jesus, there's this wrestle going on. So it was kind of inevitable. Even when Paul's speaking to Jews in synagogues in the dispersion, quoting scripture, it's kind of inevitable that Hellenistic elements would be there. And that the gospel would be attractive to people in that context.
Yes, unless anyone wants to comment on advantages or disadvantages.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which was the second part of the question.
I think one of the possible advantages this is maybe drawing a bow, but as the thoughts of Christianity, like its theology, developed, it would have taken on aspects of Greek philosophy, perhaps a development of ideas such as Gnosticism, which gave the church an opportunity to refine its theology and deal with all those other ideas floating in.
I think that's right, Bill. I mean, there's a lot of Platonic elements that came into, particularly Platonic, but other elements that came into Christian doctrine and theology. So I think that's absolutely right. They were Greek rather than Jewish. Though early on you can find those Jewish things there as well, but they gradually kind of, when you come to defining the Trinity by the 4th century, you're thoroughly Hellenistic, because there isn't any way you can define that with with Hebrew theology.
So is it an advantage or a disadvantage?
That's a good question. I would probably just say it just is.
It's a fact, yeah.
It's a fact. It just depends on how you see these things.
Yeah, it's both, I reckon.
In terms of disadvantages, one that I've always thought is quite clearly there, I'll put it this way through a series of questions. Who was the founder of this movement? Jesus.
Paul.
No, Jesus. What happened to Jesus? What happened to Jesus?
It wasn't a good ending.
It wasn't a good ending, that's right.
It wasn't a good ending. What happened?
He was crucified.
He got knocked off.
Who decided that he would be crucified?
The Sanhedrin.
Who decided that he would be crucified, a Roman punishment that only Romans would institute?
Yes.
Pilate.
The emperor. Yep.
Who was Pilate? He was the Roman governor. He was a representative of the emperor in this wider Hellenistic world. How long would it be before someone says, hey, wait a minute, this guy you're preaching about, this guy who brings good news, Jesus, wasn't he put to death by the state as a political rebel for treason? Why would I be interested in him? So you'd have to do some fancy footwork to explain in that context just how this person was worth following and believing in.
So would you like to describe the fancy footwork, John?
Well, the fancy footwork happens in stuff that people write over the next few centuries.
That's right.
And I think Luke starts it, and that's where we're going to head in the next section.
Yeah, the Trinity's fancy footwork, that's the most obvious example.
Yeah. All right, let's have a look at the next section, which is if Luke's telling this story about this Jewish man and these Jewish followers, and yet they're in the diaspora world, in the Hellenistic world, how does he start to bridge that gap? Well, one of my views about this is that there are scattered throughout Acts a number of sayings that have been found in Greek literature and indeed Roman literature before the time that Luke was writing. So Peter and John, actually, strikingly, When they say we must obey God rather than human beings, that's actually a proverb that's found in writings from Plato and Sophocles right through into Plutarch in the 2nd century after the time that Luke was writing. When Luke describes the community of believers in Jerusalem as being of one heart and soul, that's another proverb that Aristotle uses, that Cicero uses in his speeches, and that both Philo and Josephus, Jewish writers in the dispersion in the Hellenistic world, quote in their own writings. When Paul is on trial before Agrippa, right near the end of Acts, he says to Herod Agrippa, "This was not done in a corner." That's a saying that can be traced back to Plato. It's a saying that Arian, when he writes about he writes in the 2nd century about the philosopher Epictetus, quotes it. And indeed, in the 3rd century, Minucius Felix, a Christian writer, also quotes it. So it's found throughout. It describes the way that a philosopher operates in the public arena, not huddled off in a corner in private, having private tutorial lessons, but out there in the marketplace, boldly proclaiming. Paul on the Damascus Road, in his 3rd account, well, his 2nd account of that, Luke gives an account in chapter 9. Paul talks about it in chapter 22. Paul then talks about it again before Herod Agrippa in chapter 26, when he says that he really had no choice in responding to the call that he received. And he actually says that God said to him, "It hurts to kick against the goads." Now, God, whom we might expect to be speaking to Paul in Hebrew, is actually here quoting, whether in Hebrew or Greek, I don't know, quoting another Greek proverb found in plays by Euripides and Aeschylus, and writings by Pindar and right through beyond. So that's another saying that educated listeners to this gospel may well have recognized. And then, of course, we come to chapter 17, where Paul is before not just Hellenized Jews in Athens, but actual Epicurean and Stoic philosophers, where he quotes, first of all, the well-known statement that Christians mouth again and again: "In him we live and move and have our being. In him we live and move and exist." That seems to express something really essential about the nature between human beings and God. It's actually in an old work by a guy called Epimenides, who lived 7 centuries before Paul. And so scholars of the Book of Acts have determined that Paul was actually, when he says this, and I'm quoting one of your poets, that's whom he was quoting. And then he says, "We are also God's offspring," which is another line found in a later work by a guy called Aratus, who wrote a book about stars and constellations and their influence on weather patterns. And modern day critics note that actually his whole theory is quite inaccurate in terms of how the stars and the constellations influence the weather. But there is this statement about the relationship between God and humanity, which Paul quotes. So Greek sayings, Greek proverbs found in the midst of Luke's story about the early Jewish Jesus movement and the preaching that's going on out in public reflects the way that this movement is spreading across cultures. Whether the speakers actually said this or not, Luke is certainly portraying them as knowing their stuff, as being educated in Greek and Roman literature, and in being able to draw on that material to make a point to the listeners who presumably would know this. So Luke is maybe in this way is showing how this Jewish movement might have grown to be a significant movement in the Hellenistic world. So the question is simply, how do you respond to this list of what I'm calling well-known Hellenistic sayings that Luke has included in Acts? Does it surprise you, or do you have a different kind of reaction to it?
Oh, there's Matt with an enormous tome looking up the answer to the question.
Why?
So how do you respond to this list of well-known Hellenistic sayings? Who was surprised? Why were you surprised? Why are they in Acts? Why aren't they biblical? How dare they?
Hey, hang on. You know, the origin of thought didn't start with the philosophers and theologians in the scriptures. They were around for a long, long time.
They were.
Mm.
And if you can't pinch from a philosopher and a theologian, it's pretty hard cheddar, is it not?
Well, people pinch from them all the time. Nothing's changed.
Mm. Mm.
How could one write a sermon without nicking stuff? I mean,
It's beyond me.
Beyond me.
This is a time-honoured tradition.
No
That's
plagiarism in theology, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Rubbish.
Well, now you can get AI to write your essays.
Oh,
Oh, don't even go there.
Plagiarism was the highest point of honour, wasn't it? Pretending that you were Paul to write a letter meant it gave you kudos.
Yes, if you echoed what your teacher had told you, then you were honouring your teacher simply by repeating that. Yeah.
But you didn't get good
so
marks
much.
in your essays.
An experience that I
No.
had on a number of occasions while I was teaching.
Oh, right, yes.
Finding my own words being spouted back at me without acknowledgement.
I'd like to clarify that at no point that was me.
Yeah, no.
My husband used to say,
Did you stick to that, Amanda? Stick to it.
My husband used to say, if you nick the words of one person, it's plagiarism. If you nick everybody's words, then it's research.
There is some truth in that.
Mm.
And it wasn't so plagiarism as nicking their names. It's putting the name of someone famous to what you've written.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you get the fame that comes with that, presumably, is the theory behind doing that.
Mm. Mm.
Okay. Does anyone have any comment about this list of sayings? Were you surprised that they are Hellenistic rather than biblical?
I am, yes. Oh, yes, for sure.
Kumar is, yeah. Because some of them they've found our way into our hymns and into various prayers, and people have little sayings that they think are biblical, but they're actually not.
Like
they're as old or older, but they've fallen into the religion rather than being scriptural quotes.
But then look at the golden rule.
Oh, the golden rule is found in every religion. It's certainly not unique to Christianity or to Judaism, but you can find versions of it in most religions.
So once again, our clear-cut ideas of this is in this way of seeing things, and this is in this religion, and this is over here. It's not borne out by the reality in history that there are always crossovers and interactions. Yeah.
So if I'm referring to the learned teachers that we have here this evening, going back, I remember that perhaps Jesus spoke Aramaic.
Yeah, he probably would have.
And why isn't Aramaic being quoted in Paul's letters, if that's what Jesus said? If Luke is writing this, Luke and Paul and the apostles, why aren't they quoting things in Aramaic?
Because the church is predominantly Gentile by the time Luke's writing, and none of them speak it.
Right. But what about Matthew? You know how beloved Matthew is to you, Elizabeth.
Oh, he is.
and there is a theory, which Elizabeth will talk about, no doubt, that Matthew was originally written in Aramaic and then translated into Greek.
Oh,
look at that. I'm not actually buying it. Most scholars don't buy it simply because most of Matthew's literary devices and his puns and other things he does only work in Greek, which doesn't seem to support the idea that it was a translation of the Aramaic.
Okay.
He
And
might have had.
a lot of Hellenized Jews didn't speak Aramaic. They
Yes.
spoke Greek because they are in the diaspora, in the scattered empire, and if that's what they spoke. And it's like if you move, say, from Tonga or from Italy or from China, you come to Australia, your children don't necessarily speak that mother tongue well. And by the last generation, nobody may know it.
But
Similar
then
thing.
Matthew's puns in Aramaic may have been even worse, and they improved them in the Greek.
It's very hard to translate puns and things across into another thing. Yeah, particularly if you're translating from a Semitic language into the Greek and Indo-European one. They don't carry well. It doesn't work well.
And also, I mean, Greek is the language of the educated literate class. There were Jews writing Greek works centuries before Jesus. In fact, the Old Testament was translated into Greek.
Because they couldn't speak Hebrew anymore.
And Aramaic was more. I mean, the written material that we have today in Aramaic is from the 3rd century onwards, after Jesus. In other words, we don't actually have any Aram. Well, part of Daniel was written in Aramaic, and that is preserved. So that's one example. But basically, Aramaic was probably spoken in a more oral focused community, whereas Greek is being written in communities that are oral, but this is the literary level of societies. And then also Judaism, the varieties of Judaism didn't really survive past Constantine. Some did, but not many. So whatever might have been written, we just don't have because they haven't been preserved.
So if you see online the Aramaic Lord's Prayer,
right,
it's rubbish. It's translated from the Greek New Testament into Aramaic, and it may or may not be correct.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
Do that, because a lot of people believe that's the prayer that Jesus taught, and it might be, but when you're translating from Greek back to Aramaic, you're guessing at what Aramaic words the Greek's translating, so it gets very messy and it wouldn't be accurate. It's an approximation.
Right.
Anyway, that is neither here nor there. I just thought I'd warn you, because every now and again it pops up as this wondrous piece of stuff you need to know that Jesus exactly prayed this. No, he didn't.
Okay, Epicureans and Stoics. Ancient Greece, of course, which is where Paul is located in Athens, in the heart of Greece, is well known even today for its contributions to philosophy. Think Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Plato led to the Platonic school of philosophy, which continued for a millennium. And Neoplatonism has had quite a strong influence on church fathers and therefore on the formation of the creeds and the development of Christian theology. Another important school in ancient Greece was Stoicism. It emerged a century after Socrates and Plato. It exercised influence in the Hellenistic world for quite some centuries, even through to Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor, who wrote Stoic treatises. So at the time of Paul, Stoic ideas were well known, and the offshoots from the Stoics was the Cynics, and they were also well known around the place. So we talk about being Stoic, and that does relate to the system of thinking that the Stoics have. The system of logical argumentation that we use, like in debating or in arguing something through philosophically or in the law, all of that was developed by the Stoics. The ethical teachings of Stoic writers placed an emphasis on developing virtue. The 4 key virtues were prudence, fortitude, temperance, and justice. And these virtues would help all human beings to cope with whatever life throws up, all the anxiety and pain and grief and despair and crap that life throws up. So to be stoic is to manifest these virtues as primary qualities in your life, to not just to grit your teeth and bear it, but to meet challenges with the inner strength that you've developed through following this philosophy. And an important element in Stoicism was the belief in a governing fate that determined all that happened in the world. So whatever the gods were doing, they were constantly intervening into human life and determining how events would unfold. And this set the Stoics up for quite a dialogical conflict with the followers of Epicurus. We know Epicurus perhaps best about his delight for nice food, good food, but Epicurus formed a gathering of people in his garden and taught his philosophy there. And he said, well, yes, the gods do exist, but no, I don't believe that they are at all interested in what is going on here on Earth. They have their own life and their own concerns in their own realm, and they're not interfering at all in human events. So you can see how Paul is placed right, or Luke places Paul right into the midst of this interesting philosophical debate about fate and free will. Is everything determined because the gods are intervening? Or do we have the possibility of deciding what to do in our life? The Epicurean Stoic philosophers debate with Paul, dismiss him as a babbler. They're rather in disdain because he doesn't seem to present a logically worked out system of thought to them. He's just jumping around, giving them a whole lot of different ideas. Then he goes to the Areopagus, which was a prominent hill, the hill of Ares. And this is important in Athens because this is where the governing council of the Athenian city-state had met from 7 centuries before the time of Jesus. It's the equivalent in Athens to the Australian Parliament House, for those of you who are in Canberra. So he's got an audience of learned, educated, and quite possibly influential, powerful people when he speaks to the group at the Areopagus. So a question here, why do you think that Paul was keen to engage with the Athenian philosophers in their debates, more than just wanting to convert them? What do you think might have been going through his mind in him deciding to go to talk with them?
All right. Why do you think Paul was keen to engage with Athenian philosophers in debates?
Right or wrong? I mean, I just said to my group, we've got to remember who he was, who Saul was. This is his thing. This is what he likes to do.
Talk at people?
Yeah. I mean, that's his history, right?
Yeah.
It's very much up his alley to talk about law and talk about faith, regardless of whether it's in the Jewish arena or whether it's in the Hellenistic one.
Yeah.
Yes, he's been taught to debate.
Yes, he has been taught to debate. I think that's pretty clear.
And it was the only way, wasn't it? Like he had to step up into that environment to take Christianity beyond being a sect or a cult of the Jewish faith to a wider audience. So mixing it with the philosophers and the debaters and other dabblers at the Areopagus would have sort of been an important stepping stone in terms of broadening the appeal to people other than Jews of the diaspora.
That's right. He says somewhere, John would be able to say exactly where, and I'm not going to say the direct quote, but rather a paraphrase. He's all things to all people.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 9.
Yeah.
I mean, and bear in mind too that Luke is writing this decades after.
Yeah.
And he is writing it to Theophilus, who, from all we can gather, must have been an educated person, or fairly well. He calls him most excellent Theophilus, which is a term of respect for a higher status person. So an influential person in his own time. And he's probably wanting to show Theophilus and Theophilus's mates who would have gathered for the reading of Acts and for discussion of it and so on. He's probably wanting to show that this message about Jesus can mix it with the best and can hold its own in all kinds of places, including philosophical discussion. So I think there's a Lucan purpose as well as a Pauline imperative going on here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if they were not converted, but Paul's sitting debating with them, and after Paul has moved on and stopped encouraging people to jump out of windows in Troas because they're asleep, there is still this, this wretched Paul, he said da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And even if they were debating against it, that seed of what Paul said is still present and being sown.
The conversation's there.
And it's in Athens, which is this, would have been the center of Greek thought.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't do that speech, Sharon, where someone is so bored by Paul's speech, he falls asleep and falls out the window.
Not much to say about it, really. It's just...
I will send you what the youth group wrote. It was people in the church laughed at various points of it, and I thought, this is good. This is good. Yeah.
I think that story's hilarious. Anyway.
Are we right to say that Paul wasn't a very good public speaker based on the fact that he bored poor old Eutychus to death and here they're calling him a seed-pecking ditherer and they're quite rude about him. Was he actually quite a bad public speaker, or am I just trying to being encouraged to think rudely about Paul?
If he spoke the way he wrote his letters, I would say he was terrible.
Well,
but that's just my opinion.
I have this mental image of Paul dictating his letters, marching up and down
I do too.
the room, scratching his head, and poor old Sosthenes or Publius or Stephanus or whoever it is madly trying to catch up with him, because he often doesn't finish his sentences. I mean, sometimes we've got this beautiful, symmetrical, wonderful rhetoric in high rhetorical style, and then the next sentence doesn't finish and it kind of fragments and fractures. I used to enjoy teaching Romans in the advanced Greek class because you have to supply various things in order to make sense of the Greek, actually.
Yes, you do. I still remember Romans 3. It scarred me for life.
So, I mean, I think Paul could have had his moments, because some of his letters show that he can get into flights of fancy, and yet he's constantly being criticised, and it seems maybe he wasn't like that all the time.
And yet his influence is immense.
And that's right. Yeah. Yes. Well, not everyone that has great influence is high and mighty and valued and honourable. Just looking at you, Donald Trump.
That's right.
Yes, that's right.
We've got 5 minutes, so let me just
look how much you've got here for 5 minutes. Fate, resurrection, and repentance.
Well, Paul is engaging in philosophical discussion. Is it the case that the issues that the Stoics and the Epicureans would constantly be debating comes to the fore? He says that God is the one who made all the world. That's quite scriptural. We know that from Genesis, from prophetic references, from Psalms. God is the creator God. He says that God is the one who determined the times and boundaries of human existence. That also can be argued from scripture. But both of those things feed into the Stoic idea that there is a divine force that is guiding the world. The God who creates the world, the God who sets up people in their places, sets the boundaries. So maybe Paul, it was sounding somewhat stoic at this point, and yet the climax of his speech is about Jesus being raised from the dead, which of course is a crazy idea to the philosophers, because in Greek culture, resurrection was not a known idea apart from what the Pharisees in that Jewish sect were saying. But he does say that Jesus is raised from the dead to call people to repentance and to have faith in him. So that, and Elizabeth will jump in here, no doubt, maybe that dovetails with the Epicurean notion that human beings do have the capacity to make decisions for themselves about how they're going to lead lives, that it's not all about God's telling us what to do. So in my mind, that kind of sets up the Stoic Epicurean idea. Maybe Paul is having a bit both ways, at least as Luke is telling it. At any rate, they interrupted Paul at this moment. We never know how the speech ends, as is typical with a number of speeches in Acts, because there's an interruption, and Luke simply says that some believed and some mocked him. Some said, we'd like to hear more, but others weren't interested. So is Paul a failure in Athens?
No.
Is Paul a raging success in Athens? Not quite a raging success, but he is successful in that there are some who are happy to accept something of what he's saying. And so Luke is giving us a picture of an incident that kind of, oops, sorry, I had slides for that. Luke is giving us a picture of someone who articulates the gospel in a way that has some satisfaction to the philosophers. But the question is, I think the last question here is, has Paul expanded the message of the gospel beyond the message proclaimed by Peter, or is he still saying what Peter was saying? We won't go into groups for this. You can just respond to that attempt to explain philosophically this speech.
I think he's put it into debate in the wider world, the broader world, whether and was obviously successful because the gospel went right across Hellenistic stuff and further. I mean, if he hadn't kind of got into that debate, it might just be sitting back in Jerusalem.
It's probably worth remembering that even though there might not have been a belief in like a bodily resurrection, Hellenistic people did believe in an afterlife. Well, most of them did. Not all of them did, but the majority of them certainly did. Though it was a different kind of afterlife than the heaven and hell that had been kind of developed by the Jewish thought and which Christians then picked up. There was certainly reward and punishment where you went to somewhere like Hades and your punishment would be commiserate, if you like, with your sins, and your reward would be commiserate with your good deeds, depending on which outweighed the other. And the story of Lazarus and the rich man in Luke's gospel, which is a very unusual story really for a Christian parable, picks up that notion of Hades.
Yeah, so we're just on the edge of things opening up in all sorts of ways, and we know that they open up in terms of philosophy as, the apologists like Justin and Tertullian start to use philosophical modes of argument and philosophical categories, and then we get out and out apologists like Athenagoras, and then we get theologians that start developing like Origen and leading through to Athanasius and the Council of Nicaea and the Nicene Creed and so on. So there's a whole lot that does happen in this area in terms of human beings thinking about what the gospel means.
And alongside of that, of course, you get the rise of heresies, because the more it becomes institutionalized and the more doctrine it's developed that says this is the right way to think about it, then of course you have the counterpoint to that is people not thinking that, and they're considered the heretics. And there's various heresies that mark that period as well.
And don't we continue to do this? Like, we continue to articulate the gospel in a way which is meaningful in our own societies, in our own culture. And we've got quite a different world we live in now, which is post-Christendom and postmodern. So we've got all these other influences which we are grappling with and we adapt bits of, and it's exactly the same process, but just in a new era.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because people want to deny at times that the gospel is always contextualized. Well, it is. It has to be.
Yeah.
So we don't just preach the sermons of Jonathan Edwards. We actually have to rethink and restate what faith means for us in our own time.
And what we said 10 years ago, you can take a sermon and preach it today.
Well, it may or may not work, depending on how ahead of your time you might have been a decade ago. Any other questions or comments people want to make?
Oh, Elizabeth, a long time ago, something like half an hour ago, Sharon mentioned golden rule. What was that golden rule? I think you
basically it's do unto others as you would have them do unto you, as the old saying goes. That is called the golden rule.
Thank you.
And some version of it occurs in pretty much every religion. I have an excellent children's book called The Golden Rule, with a Jewish grandfather talking to his grandson. And he takes the grandson through all the different religions and what their golden rule looks like and why it's so important.
Thank you.
It's a worthwhile investment if you use books as children's talks.
What's the name of that one, Elizabeth?
It's just called The Golden Rule.
Thank you.
And I've even got the slides for it, Sharon.
Oh, great. Bounce. Are they on it, Tuck?
Well, this brings us to the close of our series of 7 studies on characters in Acts. Thanks to Amanda for the invitation. Elizabeth and I have enjoyed getting back into work mode, but we're happy also to be leaving work mode now.
That's right.
We're heading away next week to visit her family. So there on the screen are the 7 characters that we've thought about, and all sorts of issues that have been raised in this study. So as usual, thank you very much for the way that you've engaged with all that we've put in front of you, and for what you've thought about and said. Thank you.
And I would
Thank you.
thank you for the opportunity to be part of this group.
Thanks, everyone. Before you leave, I want to formally thank you, Elizabeth and John, for putting together this series of studies. As you can see, everyone is really, really grateful for your time and your effort putting all this together.
Yes.
We've learnt so much. We've been challenged along the way. And it is such a gift that you have given us. So I'd like to, on behalf of Tuggeranong Uniting and everyone here, say thank you very much. We hope that you get the good rest and good time with your family.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Maybe we'll do this again sometime. I'll talk to you about next year.
It's the year of Matthew next year.
Yes.
Matthew.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. So in fact, it would be a crime not to invite Elizabeth back to come and.
Good. You can do it all by yourself. That'd be great.
No, I can't.
Yeah. So what I'd love it to do just before we finish is, would you mind if I said a prayer for all of us?
No,
I'd love to finish off in prayer today. All right. Let's pray, folks. Loving God, you speak to us in so many different ways. Through prayer, through our connection with nature, and through wisdom and knowledge. We give you thanks for this time spent together in community, connecting with you through scripture, through wisdom, through knowledge, for good conversation, and where your spirit has woven itself through all the discussions and words that have been shared. Give you thanks for this small community that has gathered to look at the book of Acts and the characters. We give you thanks for the way in which both Elizabeth and John, but also through them and through your spirit, have highlighted different aspects of their journeys that might speak to us and challenge us. We give you thanks for Elizabeth and John's time, not only in the studies themselves, but also in what is a lot of preparation. And so may you now give them deep rest and good time spent with those that they love. And may you bless this small community as we go about our ways from here on in. May we go blessed and altered and challenged, perhaps maybe to come back again sometime soon. Amen.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank
Well,
you,
thank you,
everyone.
everyone, for coming and for your participation. It's been nice to see you all again and to have these studies again. And maybe we'll see you all next year with the year of the delightful Matthew, who seems to contradict everything Luke says. So, you know.
Not quite.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bless
very
you.
much.
Bless
All
you.
right,
Thank
bye
you.
bye. Go well, everyone.
You too.
Okay.
Safe travels.
Thank you.